Messages by Irwin Montrose. Chapter 1. The First Message. Elmbury was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. At least, not officially. Behind its picturesque cottages and well-tended hedgerows, whispers passed through the village like the wind, spreading gossip before the morning post arrived. It was the kind of place where secrets were currency, traded in quiet corners of the Black Hen, or during the Wednesday morning knitting circle at the church hall. But nobody had ever seen anything like this before. It started with a ping. At precisely 7:45 p.m. on a damp Thursday evening, an unknown number created a WhatsApp group titled Elmbury Exposed. Within seconds, nearly 50 people were added. Everyone from the vicar to the owner of the bakery, the head teacher of Elmbury Primary, and even a few teenagers who had no idea why they were there. Confused messages filled the chat.
Who added me to this?
Same. Some kind of village prank?
If this is one of the students, I will find out.
Then came the first bombshell. A voice message, barely 5 seconds long. A distorted voice, unrecognizable. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Let's begin. A second later, the first text appeared. Did you know our vicar, Father Dominic, has been sleeping with Mrs. Clark from the bakery? Silence. Then, a flood of reactions.
What the hell?
Absolute rubbish. I hope everyone here is smart enough to ignore this nonsense.
Then, a photograph appeared. Blurry but unmistakable. Father Dominic and Mrs. Clark holding hands in the back of a parked car, looking very much like a couple who didn't want to be seen. The group chat exploded. Messages came thick and fast. Denials. Outrage. Speculation. Father Dominic had not replied. Mrs. Clark had left the group. But before anyone could recover, another message appeared. And that's just the start. Detective Inspector Helen Graves disliked village scandals. She had been sent to Elmbury once before, a missing person case that turned out to be nothing more than an old man who had gone on a spontaneous fishing trip without telling his wife. The village had made it seem like an international crisis. But as she sat in her car, staring at her phone screen, she had the distinct feeling that this wasn't one of those cases. Her sergeant, Mark Devlin, was reading through the WhatsApp messages that had been forwarded to the local police station.
So, he said, raising an eyebrow, do we care about some Viker's love life, or are we just here for the entertainment?
Graves exhaled, watching as another message appeared in the chat. A second accusation, this time aimed at the local MP. The messages weren't stopping. Neither, she said, stepping out of the car. We're here to find out who's pulling the strings. By the next morning, Elmbury was no longer a sleepy village. It had become a pressure cooker of suspicion. At the bakery, Mrs. Clark's absence was palpable. Her husband, Alan, stood behind the counter, his face red with embarrassment and barely concealed rage. He barely spoke as he handed out bread and pastries, avoiding eye contact with customers who whispered behind their hands. The vicar's usual congregation at St. Mary's had dwindled. Half the pews sat empty, and those who attended spent more time glancing at him than at their hymn books. Meanwhile, the WhatsApp messages kept coming. More accusations, more supposed secrets. Some believable, others completely ridiculous. Tom Benson has been watering down his whiskey at the Black Hen. Kathy Hooper got her job because she blackmailed the previous head teacher. The accusations varied in severity, but all had one thing in common. They set the villagers against each other. By lunchtime, paranoia had set in. At the Black Hen, a shouting match erupted between Tom Benson and a group of regulars who demanded to see his stockroom. Lisa Williams locked up her shop early, convinced she was being watched. Kathy Hooper stormed into the parish council meeting demanding an investigation into who was spreading these lies. The police station received call after call. Mark Devlin, half amused, half exasperated, answered the phone for the 10th time.
Yes, we are investigating. No, we don't know who's doing it. Yes, we will keep you informed. He sighed and turned to Graves. I swear this entire village is losing its mind.
That's the point, Graves muttered, scanning the messages again. Whoever's behind this isn't just exposing secrets. They're making things up, stirring the pot just to watch the chaos unfold.
So it's not a whistleblower? Devlin asked.
No, Graves said. It's someone with a grudge, and they're playing a long game. As she spoke, another message appeared in the chat. This time, it was different. One of you knows who I am, and you're next. That night, the tension in Elmbury reached a boiling point. At precisely 9:30 p.m., another message appeared in the WhatsApp group. David Sutherland thinks he's clever. He thinks he knows who I am. Let's show him what happens to people who stick their noses where they don't belong. David Sutherland, a retired accountant, was well known for being nosy. If anyone had spent the day poking around, trying to uncover the identity of the person behind the messages, it was him. Minutes after the message, a photograph was posted. It showed David's front garden and a small bonfire burning in the middle of his neatly trimmed lawn. By the time he rushed outside, all that remained was a pile of smouldering ash. And on top of the ashes was a single printed note. "Stop digging." David's face drained of color. The entire village watched from their windows as he stood there, shaking, staring at the warning. The WhatsApp chat exploded again.
This has gone too far.
This is turning dangerous. Who is doing this? Maybe we should just shut down the chat.
Then came another message. Too late. I'm just getting started. While the village spiraled into paranoia, there was one person quietly watching, calculating every move. Olivia Harding. The owner of the Black Hen, Olivia had always played the long game. Unlike the others, she wasn't panicked. She was thriving. For years, she had resented the so-called pillars of the community who looked down on her. Now, their reputations were crumbling, and her pub was packed every night with people desperate for gossip. With a smirk, she poured another pint, listening in on hushed conversations. The truth didn't matter. In chaos, there was profit, and Olivia Harding had no intention of stopping it. She started feeding the flames herself, subtly encouraging villagers to share theories, pointing fingers at those she despised most. "Did you see how nervous Lisa looked today?" she whispered to one regular. "I bet she knows more than she's letting on. There's a thief among us, and I have proof." The attached photo was doctored, but convincing. It showed a grainy figure slipping out of the back of the parish hall with what appeared to be a bag of stolen donations. She made sure it looked just enough like a certain someone to set the village completely ablaze. The morning after the damning accusation, the falsely accused, Reverend Malcolm Tate, woke to find his world crumbling around him. The photo of a shadowy figure leaving the parish hall had spread like wildfire. He had devoted years to the village, counseling troubled parishioners, organizing charity drives, and yet, overnight, he had become a pariah. His phone buzzed non-stop with messages of thinly veiled suspicion.
Malcolm, please just be honest. Did you take the money?
We all have struggles. If you needed help, you should have said something.
I really hope it's not true.
But none of them outright defended him. At the church, he found the donation box emptied, its contents gone. Someone had smashed it in the night. Parishioners avoided his eye as they passed, whispering among themselves. He felt the judgment settling over him like a noose tightening. Shaking with anger, he stormed into the Black Hen, where the usual morning drinkers nursed their coffees and gossiped in hushed voices. Olivia Harding greeted him with a raised brow, hiding a smirk.
"Morning, Reverend," she said, wiping down the bar. "Rough night?" The pub went silent. All eyes were on him.
Who did this? Malcolm demanded, slamming his hands down. Who's spreading these lies?
"It's not a lie if there's proof," a voice muttered from the back. Laughter followed. Olivia leaned in, lowering her voice just enough so only he could hear. "You might want to think carefully about how you respond. People have a way of deciding guilt based on how someone reacts. And right now, you look guilty as hell." Malcolm clenched his fists. He had no evidence, no way to prove the photo was doctored. But he knew someone was framing him.
I'll find out who did this, he growled. And when I do, I won't be the one on trial.
Meanwhile, Detective Graves sat at the police station scrolling through the group chat messages. Something didn't sit right. The accusations were too convenient, too perfectly timed. And the escalation, it was deliberate. She tapped her pen against her desk. "Devlin, what do we know about Olivia Harding?" Her sergeant looked up.
Owner of the Black Hen. Never been in trouble with the law, but she's had her fair share of disputes with the parish council. She fought them over licensing extensions, planning permissions, petty stuff. Why?
Because while everyone else is in a blind panic, she's the only one benefiting from this mess. Graves set her phone down, a smirk forming. "Let's pay her a visit." Olivia Harding was no fool. She had felt the shift the moment Malcolm stormed into her pub, and now, with Detective Graves sniffing around, she knew her window for control was closing. So she doubled down. That night, as the village settled into an uneasy sleep, another message appeared in Elmbury Exposed.
This is a lie. I would never do that. Who is doing this?
Lisa, just be honest. We all want the truth.
This is getting out of hand.
By morning, Lisa's shop was vandalized, her windows covered in crude accusations of thief and liar. She stood outside in disbelief, shaking with anger and fear. Meanwhile, at the Black Hen, Olivia poured herself a drink, watching her phone screen with satisfaction. The best part? Lisa and Malcolm had never even liked each other. She had just pitted two innocent people against one another. Now the village was too busy pointing fingers to see where the real danger lay. Detective Graves and Sergeant Devlin arrived at Olivia's pub just as the first villagers were filing in for the morning gossip. Olivia met them with her usual confident smirk.
Detectives, what can I get you? A coffee or something stronger?
Graves leaned against the bar. Just information. You seem awfully calm while the rest of this village is tearing itself apart. Olivia laughed.
What can I say? People love a scandal.
Graves studied her carefully. Olivia was smooth, too smooth. She wasn't panicked like the others. She was comfortable in the chaos. That meant one of two things. Either she knew who was behind this, or she was behind it. And Graves had a feeling it was the latter. Detective Graves didn't believe in coincidences. Olivia's name had been ringing in her head for too long, and now it was time to dig deeper. Back at the station, she pulled up a warrant request for digital forensics. We need to trace the origins of these WhatsApp messages, she told Devlin. If Olivia is behind this, she's left a trail somewhere.
Devlin nodded. I'll get the cyber team on it, but if she's smart, she's covering her tracks.
No one's that smart, Graves said. She's gotten too comfortable. People who get comfortable make mistakes. It didn't take long for the first red flag to appear. The messages had been sent through a VPN, masking the sender's location. But hidden within the metadata of a few older messages, Graves found something Olivia hadn't scrubbed, timestamps matching when she was active at the Black Hen. Graves smiled. Bingo, she pulled out her phone and typed a message to Devlin. Meet me at Olivia's pub in an hour. It's time to turn up the heat. Meanwhile, Olivia sat in her office, sipping her whiskey, scrolling through her burner phone. She smirked at the chaos she had orchestrated. But then, her phone buzzed with an alert. Unknown number. They're on to you. Her stomach tightened. Who else was watching? Detective Graves wasn't one for waiting. She liked to strike while the iron was hot, and Olivia Harding had just landed herself in the fire. By the time she and Devlin arrived at the Black Hen, the pub was quieter than usual. The midday crowd had thinned, leaving only a handful of customers nursing their drinks. Olivia was behind the bar, polishing a glass, her usual smirk in place, as if she had been expecting them.
Back again? She asked, setting the glass down with a deliberate clink. I do hope this means you're finally here for that drink.
Graves took a slow step forward, resting her hands on the worn wooden bar.
Do I?
Graves slid her phone onto the bar, screen up, displaying a list of timestamps matching Olivia's activity at the pub with the suspected WhatsApp messages. I think you do. You made a mistake, and now we have proof. A flicker of something crossed Olivia's face, just for a second, but then she laughed, shaking her head.
Proof of what? That I like to chat with my customers? That's hardly illegal, Detective.
No, but orchestrating a village-wide smear campaign is, Graves said, leaning in. We've been tracking the messages, and all roads lead right back to you. Now you can either cooperate, or we can take this to the next level. Your choice. For the first time, Olivia's fingers twitched. She drummed them against the bar, considering.
And what exactly do you think I've done?
Graves held her gaze. You've been planting fake accusations, fueling the fire, sitting back and watching as people tear each other apart. Malcolm Tate, Lisa Williams, the Vicar, all pawns in your game. But here's the thing about stirring the pot, Olivia. Eventually, you get burned. A slow exhale. Olivia placed both hands on the counter and leaned forward slightly.
And what if I told you that I'm not the only one playing this game?
Graves didn't flinch. Then I'd say you just made things very interesting. From the back of the pub, a phone buzzed. Olivia's eyes flicked toward the sound, just a moment of hesitation, but enough for Graves to catch it. Someone else was involved, someone Olivia hadn't counted on. And now, Graves knew exactly where to look next. For the first time, Olivia Harding's smirk faltered. She had played the village like a well-tuned instrument, but now the melody was slipping out of her control. Graves saw it in her eyes, the crack in her confidence, the hesitation as she weighed her options.
All right,
Olivia exhaled, gripping the edge of the bar.
I'll talk, but you need to understand something. This isn't just about me. There's someone else pulling strings in ways I never could. And if I start naming names, I need protection.
Graves folded her arms. Protection from who? Olivia's eyes darted toward the back of the pub, toward the phone that had buzzed moments earlier. She swallowed hard.
You wouldn't believe me if I told you.
Try me. Olivia leaned in, lowering her voice.
There's someone in this village who thrives on control. They don't just spread rumors for fun, they destroy people for sport. They've done it before, and they'll do it again. I thought I was playing the game, but it turns out I was just another pawn.
Graves exchanged a glance with Devlin, who had been quietly taking notes. Who is it, Olivia? Olivia hesitated, then whispered a name. Graves' expression hardened. Now that, she said, I did not see coming. Olivia Harding had never been the kind to ask for help, and she wasn't about to start now. If she had learned anything from running the Black Hen, it was that survival meant knowing when to cut your losses and when to play your next move. And this was the most dangerous game she had ever played. She left the pub after closing, taking a longer route home, checking over her shoulder more times than she cared to admit. Whoever had been outside the window earlier, whoever had heard her give up the name, wouldn't just let that slide. Her fingers curled around her phone as she considered calling Graves, warning her that the real mastermind wouldn't go down quietly. But she hesitated. Graves would put her under protective custody, and Olivia wasn't about to be locked away like some damsel in distress. No, she had to handle this herself. She had to face them before they had a chance to strike first. With a deep breath, she pulled up a contact on her phone, the very person she had named to Graves, and typed a single message. We need to talk. Now. At the station, Graves sat at her desk, staring at her notes. The name Olivia had whispered was still rattling in her mind, an unexpected twist in an already convoluted case. She tapped her pen against the table as Devlin leaned back in his chair.
So what's the play? We haul them in now?
Graves shook her head. Not yet. If Olivia's telling the truth, we need more than her word. This person is careful, too careful. They've been orchestrating chaos from the shadows. If we move too soon, they'll slip away. We need hard evidence.
Side, which means more waiting.
Which means more digging. Graves corrected. Start with phone records, financials, any digital fingerprints they might have left behind. If they've been controlling Olivia, we'll find proof. She didn't say the rest out loud, but it hung heavy in the air. If Olivia had given up their name, she was already in danger. And if Graves didn't move fast enough, she might be too late. Olivia Harding was good at bluffing. She had spent years weaving her way out of tight corners, reading people, manipulating situations. But this time, she wasn't sure if she was walking into a negotiation or an execution. The meeting place was set, an abandoned cottage on the outskirts of Elmbury, a place she and the other person knew well. Once, it had been a secret hideaway. Now, it felt more like a grave waiting to be filled. She parked her car 100 yards away and approached on foot, her heartbeat steady but alert. The night was deathly quiet. No wind, no distant sounds of village life. Just her, the trees, and the dark. A single light glowed in the cottage window. Someone was inside. She took a breath and stepped in. The air inside was thick with damp and dust, but it wasn't empty. The figure sat at the wooden table, hands resting calmly, waiting.
You've made a mistake, Olivia.
Funny, I was just about to say the same thing.
The figure leaned forward.
You think this is a game? You don't understand what you've done.
Oh, I understand perfectly. I thought I was running things in this village, but it turns out you were the real mastermind.
She tilted her head.
You've been feeding the paranoia, manipulating people for years. I just took a page out of your book.
A slow smile curled on the other person's lips.
And look where it got you.
Olivia's grip tightened around the phone in her pocket. She had started a voice recording the moment she walked in. She just needed a confession, something solid to hand over to Graves.
I gave your name to the police.
She bluffed, keeping her voice steady.
They're already digging. It's only a matter of time before they find proof.
For the first time, she saw a flicker of something in the other person's eyes. Not fear. Calculation. Then, before she could react, the figure lunged. A hand clamped over Olivia's wrist, yanking her forward. The phone flew from her grip, skittering across the floor. She struggled, twisting, but the grip was iron tight.
I can't have you ruining everything.
The voice whispered near her ear. Olivia drove her knee up hard. The figure grunted, the hold loosening just enough for her to break free. She stumbled back, heart hammering, eyes locking on the only exit.
This doesn't end here, Olivia.
The figure called as she ran for the door.
You just made yourself the next target.
She didn't stop. She didn't look back. She just ran.
I need to see Graves, now.
The duty officer blinked at her in surprise, but didn't hesitate. A minute later, Graves and Devlin appeared from an office, both frowning at the sight of Olivia, disheveled, out of breath, and for the first time since this started, visibly afraid.
You were right, Olivia gasped. I was never the one in control. They were, and now they're coming for me.
Graves motioned her inside, closing the door behind them.
Tell me everything.
Meanwhile, Devlin sat at his desk, running another sweep of the WhatsApp metadata. Graves had ordered him to keep looking, to dig deeper than before. He scrolled through the timestamps, searching for patterns. Then he saw it. A message sent at exactly the same time as Olivia's confrontation at the cottage. But Olivia hadn't sent it. Someone else had. The message was simple, but chilling.
She dies.
Devlin's stomach tightened. He stood abruptly, grabbing the file and heading straight for Graves' office.
Boss, we've got a problem.
Graves looked up from Olivia, frowning.
What now?
Devlin placed the file in front of her, pointing at the message.
Whoever Olivia met tonight, they're watching, and they know she's here.
A tense silence filled the room.
Then we're out of time.
Graves said grimly.
I was inside.
She stammered. If I hadn't smelled the smoke. Graves arrived on the scene moments later, her heart pounding. She had expected the mastermind to strike. But this was an escalation. This wasn't just a warning. This was punishment. She turned to Devlin.
This wasn't random. They're reacting to our move, and they're getting reckless.
Devlin nodded grimly.
Reckless means mistakes. We can use that.
Graves studied the crowd gathering around the fire, searching for a face that looked too calm, too detached. The one person who wasn't shocked like the rest. And then she saw them. Standing at the edge of the crowd, half hidden in the shadows, watching the fire burn with cold indifference. The mastermind had just made their first mistake, and Graves wasn't going to let them make another.
Stay close, but don't spook them.
The suspect turned away from the fire, disappearing into the maze of Elmbury's side streets. Graves followed at a careful distance, her pulse steady. The suspect walked with purpose, no hesitation, no backward glances. They weren't just fleeing the scene, they were heading somewhere specific. A meeting? A hideout? Graves motioned to Devlin to circle around, cutting off any possible escape routes. They kept to the shadows, trailing the suspect through the quiet village. Then the suspect ducked into a narrow alleyway behind an old warehouse. Graves pressed herself against the brick wall, listening. There were voices now, 2 of them. She strained to hear.
It's out of control.
The first voice said,
We need to stop before it comes back on us.
No.
The second voice, calm, cold, replied.
We finish what we started.
Graves' grip tightened on her radio. She had just confirmed it. There were 2 of them. Across town, Olivia ignored every warning Graves had given her. She wasn't going to sit back and watch from a safe house while someone burned down her village.
She had played this game too long to bow out now. Dressed in dark clothes, hood up, she slipped back into Elmbury unnoticed. If she was careful, if she stayed out of sight, she could gather information before Graves even realized she was back. But Olivia had underestimated one thing. They were expecting her. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind. She struggled, but the grip was strong. A voice whispered in her ear.
You should have stayed gone.
And then everything went dark. Chapter 16, The Reckoning. Graves wasn't waiting any longer. She exchanged a glance with Devlin, giving him a slight nod. It was time to bring this to an end. With quiet precision, the 2 detectives stepped out from the shadows, blocking both exits of the alley. The 2 conspirators froze, their conversation abruptly cut off. One of them, Graves' initial suspect, looked panicked. The other, unshaken.
Evening.
Graves said, her voice calm but firm.
Care to tell us what you were just discussing?
The calm one, Arthur Finch, former parish council chair, respected businessman, tilted his head slightly, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips.
Detective Graves, you do have a habit of turning up at the most inconvenient times.
Funny.
Graves replied.
I was about to say the same about you.
The other figure, a younger man, shifted uncomfortably. Graves recognized him, Daniel Marsh, the council's former accountant. His face was pale, his hands twitching as though he wanted to bolt, but knew it was useless.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Devlin added.
Or would you prefer to have this discussion back at the station?
I don't see why we need a discussion at all.
Finch said smoothly.
You have no proof of anything.
Actually, we do.
Graves took a step closer, holding up her phone.
Digital traces, bank records, and a whole lot of bad decisions. I'd say it's enough to warrant some uncomfortable conversations.
Finch's smirk faltered, just for a second. Marsh, on the other hand, broke.
We didn't mean for it to go this far.
He blurted, voice shaking.
It was just meant to put pressure on certain people. Not this.
Then talk before you dig yourself in deeper.
Finch shot Marsh a withering glare, but it was too late.
It started with the WhatsApp messages.
Marsh admitted, words tumbling out now.
We just wanted to manipulate things, nudge the right people out, make some openings. But then Olivia started stirring things up too, and Finch wanted to push back. When she wouldn't back down, it escalated.
The fire?
Graves demanded.
That wasn't my idea.
Finch exhaled through his nose, looking at Graves with something between amusement and irritation.
This is absurd,
he said.
You can't prove anything.
Maybe not yet,
Graves admitted.
but give it time. And in the meantime, you're coming with us. Both of you. She motioned to Devlin, who stepped forward with cuffs. Finch's composure cracked, just slightly, as the reality of the situation settled in. Marsh, however, looked relieved, almost as if he had been waiting for someone to stop him. Just as Devlin secured the cuffs, Graves's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number.
Found her. Look for the flower petals.
Her blood ran cold. Chapter 17. Olivia's Trail. Olivia's head throbbed as she came to. Her hands were bound behind her back, her surroundings dimly lit. A damp, musty scent filled the air, an old storage room, maybe a cellar. She had been careless, and now she was paying for it. But Olivia Harding was nothing if not resourceful. Shifting carefully, she reached for her pocket with her bound hands. Her phone was gone, of course, but that wasn't what she needed. Instead, she felt for the tiny stash of flower petals she had grabbed from Lisa's shop earlier in the night. Carefully, she worked them loose and let them fall to the floor, one by one, as subtly as possible. A trail. It was all she could do. She just had to hope Graves was smart enough to find it. Chapter 18. Racing Against Time. Graves didn't hesitate.
Get them in the car. Now, I'll meet you back at the station.
She turned to Devlin.
You're going alone?
Devlin frowned.
If we waste time, Olivia might not have one left.
She snapped, already moving. I'll call for backup. Just get those two locked down. Graves sprinted toward her car, heart pounding. She had no idea who had sent the message, but she knew Olivia wouldn't leave clues unless she had no other option. This was a race, and Graves wasn't about to lose. Meanwhile, Olivia fought against the ropes biting into her wrists. The room was cold, damp, and smelled of old wood and rot. Whoever had taken her knew what they were doing. No windows, only a single door, locked from the outside. Her fingers worked furiously, trying to loosen the knots. Her captor hadn't spoken much since bringing her here, but she could hear them moving beyond the door. They were waiting. Watching. She needed to get out before they decided she wasn't worth keeping alive. She took a deep breath and did something reckless. She threw herself backward, slamming the chair she was tied to against the floor. Pain shot through her body as she hit the ground, but the impact loosened the ropes just enough. Footsteps. The door creaked.
What the hell are you doing?
Her captor snarled, stepping into the room. Olivia didn't answer. She twisted her wrists again, ignoring the pain. Just a little more. The rope snapped. She swung her freed arm up, catching her captor off guard. The sudden movement sent them staggering back, and Olivia scrambled to her feet, adrenaline surging. She had seconds before they recovered, and she intended to use them. Chapter 19. Breaking Free. Olivia didn't waste her chance. Her captor was still reeling from the sudden blow, and she lunged toward the door. Her hands were raw from the ropes, her body aching from the fall, but she pushed through the pain. She grabbed the first thing she could find, an old, rusted metal can from the shelf near the doorway, and hurled it at them. It wasn't much, but it bought her another second. She bolted through the door, slamming it behind her, and ran. The corridor was dimly lit, leading to a set of stairs. She could hear her captor cursing behind her, the sound of quickening footsteps chasing her through the building. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she sprinted up the steps, her bare feet slipping on the uneven wood. A door, old, heavy, stood at the top. She reached for it, throwing her weight against it. It didn't budge. Panic flared in her chest as she yanked at the rusted latch, willing it to open. Behind her, the footsteps closed in. With a final, desperate shove, the latch gave way, and Olivia stumbled into the cold night air. She didn't stop running. Chapter 20, A Lone Reckoning. Graves drove through the narrow village streets, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled tension. She followed the trail of petals as best she could, pushing her car faster than was safe down Elmbury's winding lanes. The messages had stopped, which meant one of two things. Olivia had escaped, or she was already beyond saving. She refused to accept the latter. Then she spotted something. A dark figure sprinting across the road ahead. Graves slammed on the brakes, throwing the car into park as Olivia nearly collapsed against the hood, breathless and wild-eyed.
Get in.
Graves shouted, throwing the passenger door open. Olivia didn't hesitate. She clambered inside just as another figure emerged from the shadows, chasing her. Graves didn't wait to see who it was. She floored the accelerator, sending the car speeding away from the scene. Only once they were clear did she glance at Olivia.
Are you hurt?
Olivia's hands trembled, her face pale.
I don't know,
She swallowed.
I don't know.
Graves nodded, keeping her eyes on the road.
You're safe now. But we're not done yet. We need to end this. Tonight.
Olivia took a shaky breath, nodding.
Then let's finish it.
Chapter 21, The Public Reckoning. Graves didn't take Olivia to safety. There wasn't time. She turned the car around and headed straight back toward the village square, where the remnants of the night's chaos still lingered. A small crowd had gathered near the fire-damaged flower shop, whispering, speculating. She wanted this to end in the open, where the mastermind wouldn't be able to slink away unseen.
Stay in the car?
Graves ordered Olivia as she pulled up, stepping out without hesitation. She spotted the familiar figure of Arthur Finch among the onlookers, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable.
Detective Graves.
He greeted her smoothly.
Something else on your mind?
As a matter of fact, yes.
Graves took a step forward.
We just had an interesting encounter tonight. Someone tried to take Olivia Harding out of the equation. And given how much you wanted her silenced, I have to wonder, did you really think you'd get away with it?
A murmur rippled through the crowd. Eyes turned toward Finch, suspicion brewing. Finch, however, didn't flinch.
That's a serious accusation,
He said calmly.
I do hope you have evidence.
You always think you're the smartest person in the room, don't you?
Graves smirked, holding up her phone.
Unfortunately for you, Olivia managed to escape, and she remembers exactly who was waiting for her.
At that moment, the car door opened and Olivia stepped out. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn, but her voice was steady.
You sent someone after me, Finch.
She said loud enough for everyone to hear.
And when that didn't work, you tried to burn Lisa out of town.
The murmuring intensified. Lisa Williams, standing near the flower shop's charred remains, narrowed her eyes.
You did this?
She demanded. Finch remained composed, but Graves saw the flicker of calculation in his gaze. He was cornered, and he knew it. Then, he tried his final move, turning to the crowd.
You all need to think very carefully about who you trust,
He said smoothly.
I have spent years serving this village, keeping order. And now, you're going to take the word of a woman who makes her living off your gossip?
He gestured toward Olivia.
Someone who benefits from chaos?
It might have worked, if not for Marsh. The younger conspirator, still rattled from his earlier confession, suddenly spoke up.
Lying?
He snapped.
I helped you with the messages, but I didn't sign up for this. You made me believe we were just shifting things in the village, not ruining lives.
The crowd turned again, this time against Finch. The murmurs grew into whispers, then into outright accusations.
He's lying.
How long has he been manipulating us?
And to think I voted for him.
Graves watched as Finch's cool demeanor cracked. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape route, one that didn't exist. Then she stepped in close, lowering her voice just for him.
It's over.
For the first time, Finch had no response. Graves pulled out her handcuffs.
Arthur Finch, you are under arrest for conspiracy, harassment, and attempted arson. You can keep up the performance if you like, but I think we both know how this ends.
The village square was silent as the final act played out. Finch, once a pillar of the community, was led away in handcuffs. And just like that, Elmbury's most dangerous secret was finally exposed. Epilogue: The Aftermath. In the days that followed, the village slowly began to stitch itself back together. The WhatsApp group was deleted, the paranoia faded, and though scars remained, so did the lessons learned. Olivia returned to the Black Hen, bruised but unbroken. Lisa Williams began the slow process of rebuilding her shop. Graves and Devlin filed their final reports, knowing that while the case was closed, the echoes of it would linger. And as the sun set over Elmbury, there was, at last, a quiet kind of peace. The end.